Sienna Fontaine, the snobby receptionist at the five-star Luminary Hotel, sneered at the black man in an old, wet coat at 11:14 p.m. That man was Derek Cole, holding his daughter Harper, who had a high fever. He begged for a room, but Sienna coldly refused and called security to kick him out into the freezing Seattle snowstorm. She did not know this poorly dressed man was actually a billionaire and the new hotel owner. Her cruel rejection showed a big problem. Harrison Thorne was using spies to ruin the system and force Derek to sell cheap. Derek swore to make them pay. He went undercover to investigate, facing shut-off cameras and clever thefts by the workers. Will his big reveal at the board meeting force these proud people to get down on their knees? Minutes before that, warm air had still wrapped around Derek's shoulders inside the lobby. Piano music drifted from hidden speakers near the fireplace. Harper's small body trembled against his chest, hot with fever. "Please," Derek had said, keeping his voice low and steady. "My daughter needs a bed. Just one room." Sienna barely glanced up from her screen. Her manicured nails clicked across the keyboard. "Already told you. We're fully booked tonight." Derek looked past her toward the lobby. Only a handful of guests sat scattered near the fire. Empty armchairs lined the walls in neat, untouched rows. "I own this hotel," he said quietly. "I bought it 3 months ago. Please, just check again." Sienna let out a short, sharp laugh, covering her mouth, as if he had told a joke. Nearby guests turned to stare at the shivering man and his sick child. "Sir, I've heard some creative stories at this desk," she said, her voice dripping with scorn. "But a homeless man owning the Luminary is a new one." Her words landed like small stones, sharp and cold. Derek's throat tightened, but he kept his eyes on his daughter instead. Harper's cheeks burned red under the lobby's warm lights. "This five-star hotel," Sienna added, loud enough for the whole lobby to hear, "isn't a shelter for homeless dreamers." She lifted 2 fingers toward a security guard near the elevator. "Leo, please escort them out." That was the moment the glass door had swallowed him back into the storm. Right after it slammed shut behind him, Derek felt the cold bite into his skin. Snow stung his face like tiny needles. Harper shivered against his chest. Her breath came out in short, hot puffs. Derek pulled his old coat tighter around her small body. He looked back once at the golden lights of the Luminary. Warm lights spilled across the icy sidewalk. Inside, rich guests laughed near a crackling fire. Outside, a father held his sick daughter in a storm. Derek walked fast down Stewart Street. His boots cracked through fresh snow. Harper's forehead burned against his neck. He needed shelter, and he needed it now. 3 months ago, he had signed the papers for that same glowing building behind him. He had promised himself the Luminary would feel different under his ownership. Warmer. Kinda. Tonight proved how far that promise still had to travel. 3 blocks down, he found a cheap motel. The sign flickered weakly through the falling snow. A tired clerk gave him room 402 for $180 a night. The heater in the room only rattled and hissed. It never actually got warm. The room smelled of old cigarettes and wet carpet. A single lamp buzzed weakly beside the bed, casting a dim yellow glow. Derek laid Harper on the lumpy mattress, its springs creaking under her small weight. He wet a small towel with warm water and pressed it gently to her forehead. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. "Boy, Daddy, I'm cold," she whispered. "Doesn't your hotel have a room for us?" Her question hit him harder than the wind outside. He owned that hotel. He owned every warm light glowing across the street. Yet his own daughter shivered under a thin motel blanket that smelled faintly of bleach. Derek pressed the towel gently against her cheek. "I'm going to fix this, sweetheart," he murmured. "I promise." Harper's small fingers curled around his sleeve, still damp from the melted snow. She drifted back to sleep before he finished speaking. Derek sat by the window. He watched the Luminary glow like a fortress of ice and gold. Something about tonight felt wrong. The lobby had looked half empty when he walked in, yet the system said every room was full. He clenched his jaw. Numbers do not lie, but people do. At 12:42 a.m., his phone buzzed on the nightstand. The caller ID showed a name he trusted completely. Sarah Jenkins, his head of digital security. "Mr. Cole, I'm sorry to call this late," Sarah said. Her voice sounded tight and fast. "Something strange is happening with the Luminary's booking system." Derek pressed the phone closer to his ear. His heartbeat quickened. "Talk to me, Sarah." "Bookings dropped 42% in the last 30 days, she said. "The system keeps marking rooms as full when they're not. I traced strange traffic to an outside server." "Someone hacked us, sir. Can you shut it down tonight?" Derek asked, keeping his voice low so he would not wake Harper. "I could," Sarah said, "but whoever did this would notice right away. They'd cover their tracks before we found the person behind it." Derek rubbed his tired eyes with 2 fingers. Outside, the wind rattled the thin motel window in its frame. Derek's chest tightened. He glanced at Harper, sleeping fitfully under the blanket. This was not bad luck. This was sabotage, aimed straight at his new hotel. He already had a name in his mind. Harrison Thorne had lost the Luminary in a $45 million deal 3 months earlier. Thorne never forgot a loss. He never forgave one either. Thorne had run this hotel for 11 years before the sale. He treated it like a trophy, something to show off at expensive dinner parties. Losing it to a stranger had wounded his pride more than his wallet. People like Thorne rarely walked away quietly. They circled back, patient and dangerous, waiting for the smallest crack to widen. If someone wanted to burn Derek's business to the ground, tonight proved they had already started the fire. Morning light crept through the thin motel curtains. Harper's fever had dropped, but only a little. Derek gave her children's medicine from a nearby convenience store. He watched her chest rise and fall, counting each breath like a prayer. Every instinct told him to call his lawyers immediately. One phone call could shut down the entire hotel for an emergency inspection. One signature could freeze every account connected to Harrison Thorne. But Derek stopped himself. If he moved too fast, the real enemy would slip away. Thorne would erase every file, delete every trace, and blame some low-level worker for the whole mess. Derek needed proof, not accusations. He needed to see the rot with his own eyes. Still, fear crawled up his spine when he looked at Harper. If he spent days chasing evidence inside his own hotel, who would care for his little girl? She had already lost her mother. She could not lose her father, too. He sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, torn between 2 duties. Part of him wanted to storm into the Luminary right now, badge his way past every locked door, and demand answers. He was the owner, after all. He had every right. But another part of him, quieter and colder, warned him to wait. Rich men who move too fast often miss the smallest clues. And the smallest clues, Derek knew, usually told the biggest truths. He glanced at Harper one more time. Her small chest rose and fell steadily now, calmer than before. Whatever he decided next would shape more than just a business deal. Around 7:30 that morning, Derek stepped outside to find hot soup for Harper. A small coffee shop sat beside the Luminary, its windows fogged with warm breath and steam. The bell above the door chimed softly as Derek stepped inside, stamping snow from his boots. The smell of roasted coffee beans filled the small shop, warm and rich. Inside, a young man in a gray, cleaning uniform sat alone near the window. He picked slowly at a dry piece of bread. A cardboard cup of weak coffee sat beside him, barely touched, steam curling off its surface. The young man looked up and froze. He recognized Derek immediately, the same man carrying a sick child the night before. "Hey," the young man said quietly, standing up so fast his chair scraped the floor. "I'm sorry about last night. That wasn't right, what they did to you." Derek studied him for a moment, reading the honesty in his tired eyes. "You work at the hotel?" "Marcus," the young man said, holding out a small hand warmer still in its plastic wrapper. "Night cleaner. 3 years now." He pushed the warmer toward Derek. "Here, for your little girl." Derek took it, surprised by the small kindness, from a stranger who owed him nothing. "Thank you, Marcus. That means a lot." Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, glancing nervously toward the window. "It's $19 I don't really have, but your daughter needs it more than my coffee needs to stay warm." Derek glanced at the young man's worn shoes and thin jacket. Marcus clearly had little to spare, yet he gave without a second thought. The kind of honesty felt rare inside any hotel, rich or poor. Marcus lowered his voice, glancing toward the hotel's glass doors. Ever since the new management stepped in, things changed. People like Sienna only care about guests and fancy cars now. Workers like me? We're nothing to them. Then Marcus leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "You want answers about the empty rooms? Don't look at the front desk. Look at the loading dock. 2 in the morning. Trucks come and go, and nobody asks questions." Derek felt something shift inside him. A cleaner with nothing to gain had just handed him the first real clue. By early afternoon, Derek made his decision. He would not wait for Thorne to strike first. He would walk straight into the danger and find the truth himself, no matter the cost. He hired a private nurse named Eleanor to watch over Harper around the clock. He installed a small camera in the room just to check on his daughter whenever fear crept in. Then he changed his appearance completely. He traded his fine wool coat for a faded khaki jacket from a thrift store. The fabric smelled faintly of mothballs and someone else's cologne. A dirty black beanie replaced his usual polished look. $4.50 bought him a whole new identity. He studied himself in a cracked mirror at the shop's entrance. Tired eyes stared back, a stranger's reflection layered over his own face. The billionaire vanished. In his place stood an invisible man, the kind nobody in a 5-star hotel ever looked at twice. Derek almost smiled at the irony. Wealth had once opened every door for him. Tonight, he needed to look poor enough to slip through the cracks unseen. That night, Derek approached the loading dock behind the luminary. Steam rose from a laundry truck idling in the alley. The heavy metal door creaked open as workers pushed carts inside. Derek slipped through the gap before the door closed. Cold metal brushed his shoulder. The smell of bleach and diesel fuel filled his nose. He was inside now, deep in the hidden world of his own hotel. His first obstacle appeared almost immediately. Leo, the same broad-shouldered guard from the night before, patrolled the hallway with heavy footsteps. Derek grabbed a rusty wrench from a nearby cart and pretended to inspect a pipe. Leo's flashlight swept close, then closer still. Derek's pulse hammered in his throat. Just before the light landed on him, a cart loaded, with dirty linens rolled into the hallway. Marcus pushed it directly into Leo's path, blocking his view completely. "Watch it," Leo snapped, stepping around the cart. Marcus caught Derek's eye and jerked his head toward side door. Derek slipped through it just as Leo's footsteps faded away. "Are you crazy?" Marcus whispered once they were alone. "If they catch you, they'll call the cops on you, not them." Derek met his eyes, steady and calm despite his racing heart. "Help me find the truth, and I promise you justice will come. Real justice, not just talk." Marcus studied him for a long moment. Something in Derek's voice made him nod. He had spent 3 years watching this hotel change for the worse. Maybe tonight that could finally change back. Through a narrow vent in the utility room, Derek watched Sienna Fontaine standing near the back stairwell. A tall man in an expensive gray suit stood close beside her, his shoes polished to a bright shine. "That's Richard Vane," Marcus whispered, crouching low beside Derek. "Works for Harrison Thorne." The metal vent felt cold under Derek's fingers. Dust tickled his nose, and he fought the urge to sneeze. Below, Vane's cologne drifted up through the grate, sharp and expensive. Vane pressed a thick envelope into Sienna's hand. Derek counted through the vent, his eyes narrowing. $15,000, wrapped tight in a rubber band. "Keep marking rooms as full," Vane murmured. "By Friday, the stock price crashes. Thorne buys the hotel back for pennies. You get a seat on the new board." Sienna smiled, sliding the envelope into her purse without a shred of guilt. Derek's jaw tightened until his teeth ached. This was not carelessness. This was betrayal planned down to the last dollar. He now understood the size of the trap closing around him, but understanding was not enough. He needed proof that could not be argued away in any courtroom. The next clue led Derek to the third-floor office, just behind Sienna's front desk. That room held the hotel's central server, locked behind 2 layers of security. Marcus had warned him about the keycard lock. Derek carried a small black device in his jacket pocket, no bigger than a phone. It could copy the signal from any nearby key. He waited near the lobby stairwell, pretending to mop a spot that was already clean. Marcus had loaned him the mop and bucket without a single question. When Sienna finally walked past on her way to the restroom, Derek angled the device toward her purse. The little screen blinked steadily, counting upward. 12 long seconds later, it flashed 100%. Derek exhaled slowly, his shoulders loosening for the first time in hours. He now held the key to his own hotel, stolen from the woman who had thrown him out into the snow. Marcus caught his eye from across the lobby and gave a small, nervous nod. Neither man said a word. They did not need to. That night carried real danger, and Derek knew it. If security caught him with a cloned key card, they would call it corporate espionage. He could lose custody of Harper. He could lose everything he had built. He thought about walking away completely. He could simply fire everyone tomorrow and hire a whole new staff. But that path would let Harrison Thorne slip away clean, free to try this scheme again at another hotel, against another family. Still, he thought of Harper's small voice asking why her father's hotel had no room for them. That question pushed him forward, past every warning in his mind. Whatever waited behind that office door, he had to see it through. At 1:15 in the morning, Derek used the clone card and slipped inside the dark office. The lock clicked open with a soft, electronic beep that seemed impossibly loud in the silent hallway. Only the glow of a sleeping computer screen lit the room. Papers sat stacked neatly on the desk, each one stamped with numbers that told a lie. He plugged a small secure drive into the main server, his fingers steady despite his racing pulse. Numbers scrolled across the screen. Lines of hidden code. A hidden program, quietly rejecting real guests while reporting fake vacancies. Derek's hands moved fast, copying file after file, watching the progress bar creep toward completion. 91%, 94%. Every second felt like an hour. Somewhere down the hallway, an elevator dinged softly, and Derek's whole body went rigid. Then he heard laughter in the hallway, growing louder with every step. Sienna and Leo were coming back from a late night out, laughing about something Derek could not hear. Panic shot through his chest like ice water. He yanked the drive free and shoved it deep in his pocket. There was no time to leave through the door. He ducked behind a heavy red curtain by the window instead, pressing his back against cold glass. The door swung open. Leo flipped on the lights, filling the room with sudden brightness. Leo's nose wrinkled. He smelled melted snow and something out of place, faint but unmistakable. His hand drifted toward the taser, clipped to his belt. Derek's phone buzzed against his leg, muffled but urgent. Eleanor was calling. Harper's fever had spiked again, and every second mattered. The vibration rattled softly against the curtain fabric. In the dead silence of the office, it sounded like thunder. "Who's there?" Leo barked, stepping toward the curtain. "Come out now." Derek held his breath. Sweat rolled down his jaw, cold against his skin despite the warm office air. His fingers curled tight around the small drive hidden in his fist, the plastic edges biting into his palm. Behind him, the window latch pressed against his spine. One wrong move, one creak of the old floorboards, and everything he had built tonight would collapse in an instant. Leo's boots scraped closer across the carpet. Sienna stood frozen by the door, her arms crossed, watching with narrowed eyes. Just as Leo reached for the curtain, a loud crash echoed from the hallway outside. A large ceramic vase shattered against the marble floor. Leo and Sienna spun around and rushed out to check the noise. Marcus stood near the broken pieces, feigning shock with wide eyes. Derek did not waste a single second. He slipped through the window and grabbed the metal drain pipe outside. Cold metal bit into his palms as he lowered himself down, one careful movement at a time. He landed hard in the dark alley behind the hotel, snow crunching under his boots. Pain shot through his ankle, but he barely noticed it. Above him, a window slammed shut and shouting voices faded into the storm. Derek pressed his back against the brick wall, chest heaving, breath fogging in the freezing air. He waited 3 full minutes before moving again, listening for footsteps that never came. In his pocket sat everything he needed: the hidden code, the stolen conversations, and proof of sabotaged heating systems across 3 entire floors. He finally held the sword needed to end this war. Now he just had to survive long enough to use it. Friday morning arrived cold and clear. At the small apartment, Harper sat up in bed, eating warm soup that Eleanor had made. Her cheeks had color again. Her fever had finally broken. Derek dressed slowly, buttoning a gray suit that once fit his old life perfectly. The fabric felt smooth and cool against his skin, nothing like the rough thrift store jacket from days before. He straightened a navy silk tie and smoothed his short beard in the mirror. Harper watched him from the bed, her eyes bright and curious again. "You look like a superhero, Daddy," she said, giggling softly. Derek smiled and kissed her forehead. "Today, I kind of feel like one." The tired father from the snowstorm had disappeared completely. In a mirror stood a man ready to take back everything that belonged to him. His phone buzzed with a message from his office. Harrison Thorne and a group of investors had already gathered inside the luminary. They planned to force a takeover before lunch. Derek read the message twice, his jaw tightening. Thorne thought he still held every advantage. He had no idea the tables had already turned completely. Derek slipped the small drive into his jacket pocket, feeling its weight against his chest like a shield. He walked out to his car, ready for the fight of his life. At 11:14 that morning, exactly 36 hours after his family was thrown into the cold, Derek walked into the luminary's grand lobby. Harrison Thorne stood near the front desk, holding a thick folder of fake reports. With the heating system failed and occupancy near zero, he announced loudly, "We demand control return to protect this brand." Sienna stood beside him, smiling with quiet pride, waiting for her promised promotion. Then the revolving door spun, and Derek stepped inside, with 2 lawyers and 4 Seattle police officers close behind. Sienna's smile froze. Her face drained of color as she recognized the man in front of her. The same tired father from the storm now stood taller than anyone in the room. Derek walked straight to the podium, calm as still water. He plugged his drive into the lobby's massive display screen, without a single word of explanation. The giant screen flickered to life above the crowd. Video footage rolled across it, clear and undeniable. Sienna accepting a thick envelope of cash. Leo cutting wires to the heating system with practiced hands. Lines of hidden code rejecting guest after guest. Gasps rippled through the crowd of investors and reporters. Someone's coffee cup slipped and shattered against the marble floor, but nobody moved to clean it up. Harrison Thorne's face turned pale as paper. Sweat beaded along his hairline despite the cool lobby air. He took one step backward, searching desperately for an exit that no longer existed. "This is fabricated," Thorne stammered, his voice cracking. "This proves nothing." Nobody in the room believed him anymore. 2 officers moved quickly and locked handcuffs around his wrists, the metal clicking sharply in the silent lobby. Thorne's protests dissolved into stunned silence as he was led toward the door. Sienna's knees buckled beneath her. She sank down onto the cold marble floor, clutching at the edge of Derek's suit jacket. Her perfect hair had come loose, falling messily around her tear-streaked face. "Mr. Cole, please," she choked out, her voice cracking with every word. "I didn't know who you were. I was only following orders. Please don't ruin my life." Around them, reporters leaned closer, cameras flashing bright against the marble floor. Other hotel staff watched in stunned silence from the edges of the lobby. Derek looked down at her, his voice steady and quiet, without a trace of anger. "This hotel was built on hospitality," he said. "Real hospitality starts with respecting every person's dignity. It doesn't matter if they wear a torn jacket or an expensive suit." He paused, letting his words settle over the silent lobby. "You're not losing your job because I want revenge," he continued. "You're losing it because you forgot what it means to serve people with kindness." Security quietly walked Sienna toward the back office, her sobs fading into the crowded lobby. Derek turned toward Marcus, who stood frozen near the edge of the room, still holding a broom in one trembling hand. "Marcus," Derek said, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "Starting today, you're the new operations manager of this lobby. $6,200 a month, and full tuition for hotel management school." Marcus stared at him, speechless, his eyes shining with disbelief. His hands, still rough from years of scrubbing floors, trembled slightly at his sides. "I don't know what to say," Marcus finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Say yes," Derek replied, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "You believed in doing the right thing when nobody was watching. That matters more than any degree." Marcus nodded quickly, blinking back tears he refused to let fall in front of the crowd. The lobby doors opened once more. Eleanor walked in, carrying Harper bundled warmly in a soft blanket. Warm air from the fully restored heating system wrapped around them like a gentle hug. Derek crossed the room and lifted his daughter into his arms. She pressed her small face against his neck, finally warm after 2 long, freezing days. Her small hand found his collar and held on tight. "Daddy," Harper whispered, smiling sleepily. "Our hotel feels so warm now." "It does," Derek agreed, his voice thick with quiet relief. "And it's going to stay that way." Around them, the lobby slowly returned to normal. Guests whispered among themselves, some already reaching for their phones to share what they had witnessed. A reporter scribbled notes near the fireplace, her pen moving fast across the page. Marcus stood nearby, still stunned by his sudden promotion. He looked down at his old cleaning uniform, then up at the warm, glowing lobby around him. For the first time in years, he let himself imagine a different future. Derek held his daughter close, watching soft snow drift past the tall windows outside. Flakes caught the golden light before melting against the warm glass. The storm outside had not stopped, but inside these walls, something important had finally been set right. 9 floors above them, workers were already restoring heat to every room, one radiator at a time. Somewhere below, Eleanor gathered Harper's blanket, humming quietly to herself. Derek thought back to the cold sidewalk outside, to the moment a stranger's cruelty had almost broken him. That pain had taught him something no business degree ever could. True wealth meant nothing without kindness behind it. Kindness had returned to the luminary, and this time, nobody could take it away.